It's Monday, January 28th, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On Barnstable Today, we explore the historical structures in the path of climate change and learn how to decipher our electric bill. First up, municipal and community news and notes. Exciting news for Barnstable Public Schools. Barnstable High School just received a $100,000 grant from the Baker-Polito administration for the development of an environmental science and technology pathway. This will allow students to develop skills in environmental, marine, and bioscience industries, which are in high demand in the region. The grant will help the school purchase equipment to create a small-scale water treatment plant simulator fit with water tanks and computer technology so students can conduct tests and analyze how to keep living organisms alive and healthy. With sea levels rising, more historic structures will be impacted in Barnstable and across Cape Cod. Cape Cod Commission Historic Preservation Specialist Sarah Korjeff joins us in studio to tell us more and about an initiative to inventory all the historic structures in the floodplains in the region. There's so many things to think about with climate adaptation, mitigation, but what about our historical structures? With me today, Sarah Korjeff from the Cape Cod Commission. You're a historical preservationist.
That's right. So my title is Preservation Specialist and Planner at the Cape Cod Commission, and my job really is to work with all 15 towns in the county on ways to protect their historic resources. And that could be historic buildings, or it could be cemeteries, or it could be cultural landscapes, or even artifacts. So I work with a lot of nonprofits and town committees to try to find ways to make sure that we don't lose these important resources.
Right, and there's so much history on Cape Cod, especially with our structures. Mm-hmm. We have some of the oldest structures here in the country, the Pilgrims did land here first. That's right. But let's talk a little bit about the initiative that you're working on right now, which is to inventory these structures. So give us a little background of how this initiative started.
Sure. Well, for a long time, people have tried to maintain a list of the historic properties in their towns. And Mass Historical Commission actually maintains a statewide list of inventoried historic properties. There's a special form that people can fill out that they then have access to online, or the state puts online so people can use it as a research tool. But a lot of inventory has been done on the Cape, but we know that there are many historic properties that haven't yet been inventoried. So what we're hoping to do is fill in those holes, either working with towns or some local historical commissions specifically to get them to address an area that we know hasn't been touched, or for us to actually go out, commission staff to go out and try to make sure that areas that haven't been inventoried in the past are inventoried now, or maybe ones that were inventoried 40 or 50 years ago, that we check them again and make sure that the inventory is up to date and that we've actually captured all of the important buildings that are out there.
All right. So let's start a little bit with the floodplain issues that we're facing as we get superstorms and as sea levels rising with this climate change. How is this impacting, or how is this making your job a little more, I guess, harder to challenging? Yes, challenging to do.
Yeah, well, I think everybody knows that we've been experiencing more storms, and we've seen a lot of coastal erosion. And for example, in Provincetown recently, we've seen a lot more inundation, water actually coming in away from just the edge, the actual coastline, and impacting historic buildings. And so we've been trying to make the issue of historic properties in the flood zone one that people can pay more attention to, and we're trying to increase education and information about that. So as part of that, we've actually put out a series of maps that look at how many historic properties on Cape Cod we have inventoried and how many of those are impacted by flood hazards. Our first map shows about 11,000 properties on Cape Cod that are historic and have been inventoried. And they, the map we show color codes it a little bit so that the darkest color blue is showing us where the oldest properties are, so that would be pre-1800 properties.
Right.
And then, and I guess no surprise that those kind of follow Route 6A and some other really common transportation corridors that we
Right.
know have been around for a long time. But then as the colors get a little more purpley and a little lighter blue, then those are the 1800s and the early 1900s. So out of those 11,000 properties that have been inventoried, we know actually that there are, or we're pretty certain that there are significantly more, because we know there are whole sections of the Cape that haven't been inventoried or that haven't been inventoried recently. But even if we look at that 11,000, and then we say, okay, well, how many of those properties are in flood hazard areas? We come up with roughly 2,300 properties, or about 20% of that 11,000 number, are historic buildings that could be impacted by flood hazards, and that's a big number, and that's a lot of people who would be concerned. And this is just historic properties. Of course, we know there are others that are not historic that are going to be impacted too.
Right.
But part of the reason for calling out historic properties is because there are some special regulations for them. Normally, when you make a substantial improvement to your property, you're required, if you're in a flood zone, to actually elevate it and lift it up several feet above base flood elevation.
Right.
But if you're a significant historic property listed on the National Register of Historic Places, then you actually don't necessarily have to elevate. You can look for other ways to protect the building from flood hazards. And there are a lot of different ideas out there that people are using in different countries and also in different cities around the US. But some of them involve flood-proofing the lower levels of the building, or building some kind of a physical barrier immediately around the structure to protect it, or if we're talking about whole neighborhoods or districts, potentially creating barriers that would prevent floodwaters from entering an entire area.
Wow, it's fascinating to know that there's that many structures, for one thing, and that there are some that probably have not been cataloged. But right here in Barnstable, that comes to mind for me is Sandy Neck. I mean, those are
That's
probably
right.
about 100 years old, right?
Yeah, or more even. So late 1800s is the date for a lot of
Yeah.
the Sandy Neck properties. And actually, it's that's one of the places that we looked specifically as an example. We picked a couple across the Cape to try to illustrate just how significant the problem is.
Right.
And Sandy Neck, we have a group of historic properties there, and not only are they inventoried, but they're also on the National Register of Historic Places. So we know they meet that certain level of significance. And there we have put together a series of maps, one that is sort of a bird's eye view that shows in red where the buildings are on the land. And then there's sort of a dotted line that shows the outline of the National Register Historic District. So all the little red building footprints you see there, those are all buildings that are recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. Of course, it includes the lighthouse and most of the other buildings we're used to seeing there. But then if you overlay a map of the flood zones, the flood hazard areas there, you can see that every single one of those buildings would be underwater. And I'm not saying completely underwater, but they would be impacted by water. And so looking at what do we do with a situation like that, how can we help these folks prepare for the future? And there's, as I said earlier, there's a lot of different possibilities, but we don't think that just lifting the buildings up in the air is necessarily going to be the best long-term solution for all of them. In some cases, some of these buildings along our coastlines have been moved there from another location way back when we didn't realize it was so common to move buildings. And so to a certain extent, we need to think about whether moving them again to higher ground is a good solution. So that's that'll be a trick. But there's a lot to consider.
So you've inventoried, I believe, is it Yarmouth so far in this initiative?
Well, so we've been doing some inventory work in Yarmouth, actually updating just 41 properties in South Yarmouth, looking to make sure that, so these are buildings that are in the South Yarmouth Historic District, and not all of them were even impacted by the flood zone, but they're properties that we knew hadn't been inventoried for a very long time, and we wanted to make sure that both the buildings and the outbuildings we're up to date, and I think it's really just kind of a pilot to see whether we can, in small doses, do improved inventories like this with modest amounts of money, bringing in consultants in this case to do the work, though in some cases we may bring in just knowledgeable individuals or have commission staff do some of the work.
Right. How do residents kind of get involved in this? Like, there's a whole lot of folks with historic houses, right? So do they know that they're on this inventory already, or do they need to contact the commission? Is there a form or someplace that they can go to find out more about this?
Sure. Well, probably they might or might not know that their property's been inventoried. I'd like to think that most people would know, but probably the easiest place to find out is to go to the Mass Historical Commission website, and they have what's called the MACRIS database, and it stands for Massachusetts Cultural Resource Inventory. And there you can actually search by your town and your street address and pull up and find out whether there is a historic inventory form already on file for you. What may even be easier for a lot of folks is to contact their local historical commission. And you can start at town hall or on the town website to figure out how to do that. And chances are really good that your town actually has copies of all this data too on their own GIS database. And that's a good way to get started. And then look at the date. How long ago was your inventory done? Is it somewhat recent, in the last 10, 20 years, or is it really old and maybe doesn't have a whole lot of information? That may be an area where we're looking to do some updated inventory. But I also want to sort of look ahead to the future and acknowledge that the flood areas we have today aren't going to be static. I mean, it will change over time, and our friends at Barnstable County Extension and Woods Hole Sea Grant have actually done a projection for the town of Barnstable looking at the number of properties that are in flood hazard areas now. And then they looked at a slightly different data set. I think they looked at pre-1900 properties. So they came up with 193 inventoried historic buildings that are in flood hazard areas today. But then when they projected forward where they anticipate those hazard areas will be by 2075, they came up with 73% more historic properties that would be impacted, so over 300. So we're really going to be looking to improve inventories, not just in the hazard areas, but even outside.
Even outside, my goodness. Absolutely fascinating work. I can't wait to see as you progress with this initiative, what more you may come up with. I mean, are you finding things that are somewhat surprising to you as you're going through these inventories, or is it, oh yes, we knew this?
I think we're always surprised when we find a building that hasn't been inventoried yet, when people have been thinking about historic structures here for, I don't know, maybe 75 years and have been doing inventories for about 50. So it's always a little bit of a surprise that this place has snuck through the cracks, and we want to understand why, but I think we're excited when we can actually get that information out there as a research tool, and hopefully at the same time bring in more people and help them understand that we're not just looking to gather this information for ourselves, but also to help people understand the significance of their properties and get them excited about what options they have for protecting it in the long term.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Paula.
Reading your electric bill can be confusing. Delivery charges, suppliers, kilowatts used, and multiple meter readings. Austin Brandt, Senior Power Supply Manager from Cape Light Compact, breaks down the bill and has some helpful tips for those phone solicitations too. We're always thinking about saving money and saving energy here in the winter on Cape Cod. With me today, Austin Brandt from the Cape Light Compact. It's starting to get cold, and people are starting to see those electric bills rise a bit.
That's right, yep. And I have heard from a lot of customers, as is normal this time of year, about them getting calls from electricity suppliers who promise to save them money by signing on to a contract. And so What we always advise customers, especially at this time of year when prices are high overall, is to look really carefully about at those offers that you're getting and be sure that you know what you're signing up for if you're shopping around for competitive supply at this time of year.
Right, and it might not be the best time to do it this time of year. So how does Cape Light Compact set their prices?
So the Cape Light Compact for residential and small commercial customers has 6-month pricing cycles. So what we do is every 6 months we go out and we buy electricity for our customers on the wholesale market. Now what we find is that our pricing cycle that runs December through June is generally higher than the one that runs June through December. And that's typical of all of New England, because what's happening in New England is over 60% of our electricity comes from natural gas. So in the winter months, when people are using natural gas to heat their homes, there's less left over for electricity producers to buy on the secondary market. And when there's less supply, high demand, you're driving prices up. And so what we see in the wintertime in New England is because of this natural gas pipeline capacity issue, we have higher electricity prices only during these winter months. Now, what suppliers like to do is when prices rise and suppliers like the Cape Light Compact, like Eversource Basic Service, have to raise their prices because we had to buy more expensive electricity, as does everyone. What they like to come in and do is offer, say, a 12-month or a 24-month rate that looks really great right now, but when prices drop in the later part of the spring and in the summer months, it may not be such a great deal in terms of price.
Right. And why don't you give some tips about what happens when those phone calls come in and when people are soliciting? They're pretty nefarious, aren't they?
Some of them really are, and try to use some shady tactics to get people to sign up. But what we tell customers is always ask for written information. So ask them to send you written information about the offer in the mail. If they are an above board company, they're generally willing to do that. Never ever provide your Eversource electric account number for any reason to anyone that you're not sure you want to be on their power supply. And never commit to anything over the phone. You always want to get it in writing, and you want to read what the terms and conditions are of the offer.
All right. So talk about reading here. That electric bills it reminds me of algebra. There's lots of X's and Y's and numbers that don't make a lot of sense. So you're going to walk us through reading an electric bill today?
Sure. Yep, I can talk a little bit about that. So your electric bill from Eversource has 2 main parts. There's supply or generation, and that part of the bill you have control over by picking or choosing a power supplier, and there are a lot of them out there. The Cape Light Compact provides supply for anyone on the Cape or Vineyard who wants to participate. There's also the delivery portion of the bill. These are charges that Eversource sets and are approved by the Department of Public Utilities, and they collect those charges to pay for the poles and wires and distribution infrastructure that brings the power to your home or business. So what these offers that are being offered to customers right now over the phone or in the mail are for supply only. You don't have any choice over who your delivery company is. That's Eversource as the local utility. But on the bill, there are a couple important things you want to look at. You want to look at your price per kilowatt hour, especially for supply, which you have control over. And you want to understand what you're paying for supply on a per kilowatt hour basis. But also importantly, you want to look at what you're using in terms of your total kilowatt hours, because that is really the bigger driver of cost in the wintertime, especially for those that have electric heat or poorly insulated homes. And the Cape Light Compact can impact both of those cost aspects. We offer supply that you can choose to participate in to reduce your supply costs potentially, depending on what competitive supply rate you're on. And then we also offer energy assessments to help customers reduce their usage, potentially through insulation or other energy saving measures. Right. And we offer that at no direct cost through our energy audit program.
Right. So it's funny when you say the kilowatt hours. Give a person an example of some numbers in kilowatt hours and what those appliances or what those things might be, because that always kind of baffles me. Is I see how much we've used, but I'm not sure what's using it, right?
Absolutely, yep. So the biggest energy drivers in a residential home are heating, cooling, hot water, and lighting. And the Cape Light Compact Energy Efficiency Program can impact all of those and save you money on all those areas. So what our energy assessment team will come in and do is they will measure assess how insulated the home is, and that can often be the biggest bang for your buck in terms of saving money. And we offer incentives to help customers pay for additional insulation on their home, which can save them money and help their home be more comfortable. We offer rebates on efficient appliances, which are big energy users in the home. We offer rebates on heating and cooling systems. So those are really the biggest drivers. We offer energy efficient lighting upgrades at the time of the assessment. We go in and we'll change out old inefficient light bulbs for new LEDs, and that can save money as well.
Right. It's funny, that insulation, I have to say, we took advantage of that, and you can tell. I mean, the house was probably 30 to 40% warmer than it ever was.
Absolutely.
Just getting the insulation into the attic, it was an amazing. And when we're talking about bills as well, you know, this time of year, obviously, we're using more energy because it's cold and we have other things out there. But what are some of the other pieces that people can put in place? I noticed that there's these, they call them vampire energy users. So what are those?
So vampire loads are loads where, your microwave, for instance, most people just leave it plugged in all the time. It's not running most of the time except when you're cooking food, but even when it's plugged in, it's drawing a little bit of electricity. Same with your DVD player, your TV, your cable box. Cable box is actually a pretty big user of energy. So one of the things that the Cape Light Compact provides through its energy assessment program is actually smart strips. And what smart strips do is they cut off physically the power to those devices that aren't in use based on the device that's plugged in that is controlling the other. So for instance, if you have an entertainment system where you have your TV, your cable box, your speakers, your DVD player, if you use the TV as the control plug, and when you turn off the TV, it will cut power to all those other devices on the smart strip.
That's fantastic, and a really easy way to save money in energy.
Absolutely, and one that doesn't impact how you use your equipment.
Right, and I know one of Lindsay's favorite tips is to open up those curtains in the morning and just heat your rooms through the sunshine that's out there.
Absolutely.
Little of it, but there's some.
Absolutely, curtains that you open in the morning can let light in, natural heating. If you close them at night and they're insulated, they can help keep your house warmer and save you energy there as well.
Excellent. Anything else you want to add before we leave today?
No, we have a lot of good information on our website. We always encourage our customers to sign up for the free home energy assessment. The number is on our website, and if they want to find out more about competitive supply offers or how to assess whether or not they're getting a good offer or want to sign up for a power supply program, that information's on our website as well.
Excellent, fantastic. Thanks, Austin.
Thank you, Paula.
Here's a look at things to do, places to go, and people to meet. Stop by the Sturgis Library Book and Gift Shop for a huge sale of barely used music CDs. Hundreds of titles are available, primarily classical, opera, and popular music. All are in fantastic condition and were lovingly collected by true music aficionados. CDs will sell for just $1 each or $2 for multiple disc sets. The sale will run for the next several weeks or until sold out. Don't miss this chance to expand your music library. Now, a look at the upcoming meetings for boards, commissions, and committees. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, email us, or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.